Continuing with Lenin's plan to defeat the capitalists by stirring up revolution in the colonies, the places where the Europeans stole from, Asia, Africa, South America. Once the colonies all have a revolution, become independent, and the capitalists, the Europeans, the Americans won't have anyone to steal from anymore, then the Western Europeans, the American capitalists, won't be so rich anymore. Their people won't be so happy with capitalism anymore. Maybe they'll want a workers' democracy also. So I've already covered the revolutions in Russia and China. I'll move now to Vietnam, some place you probably heard of, originally called French Indochina. The French were the colonialists in charge, not just Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. The name of the communist leader, Ho Chi Minh, this very nice little book by an author named David Halberstam, mostly famous for doing books on sports. This is his book on Ho Chi Minh. And right after World War II, Ho Chi Minh, trying to appeal to Americans, issues his Declaration of Independence for Vietnam right after World War II in 1945. These words should sound familiar. He begins by writing, "All people are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." This immortal statement was made by the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America in 1776. The Declaration of the French Revolution, made in 1791 on the rights of people and citizens, also states, "All people are born free and with equal rights, and must always remain free and have equal rights." These are undeniable truths. Nevertheless, for more than 80 years, the French imperialists, abusing the standard of liberty, equality, and brotherhood, have violated our fatherland and oppressed our fellow citizens. They have acted contrary to the ideals of humanity and justice. They have built more prisons than schools. I believe we were doing that in California, at least for a while. Built more prisons than schools, mercilessly slain our patriots, drowned our uprisings in rivers of blood. In the field of economics, they have fleeced us to the backbone. They have robbed us of our rice fields, our mines, our forests, our raw materials. They have invented numerous unjustifiable taxes. That should sound familiar to Americans. Numerous unjustifiable taxes. And so Ho Chi Minh saying in effect to the United States, you know, you Americans, we Vietnamese have a problem. We have a foreign power, a colonialist in charge. I'm talking about the French. And we really would like to have a revolution and kick out the foreign colonialists, the French. And we thought maybe you Americans would be sympathetic. You were ones under the thumb of a foreign colonialist, the British. You had a revolution and kicked them out. We thought maybe you would be sympathetic with our struggle and help us kick out the colonialist who is oppressing us. The United States thinks Ho Chi Minh is crazy. The French are among our very closest allies. We're not going to fight the French. They helped us in our own revolution. We fought World War I with France. We just fought World War II with France. We love French fries. We're not going to help you fight the French. Ho Chi Minh then says the same thing to the Russians. The Russians are more than eager. Help you fight them damn capitalist, colonialist French. That's our whole plan. The Russians, the Chinese, give Ho Chi Minh weapons. He uses those weapons to blow the French from Southeast Asia. Early 1950s, 1952, a peace treaty is signed, dividing Vietnam temporarily in half. Ho Chi Minh, the communists, control North Vietnam, and when the French leave, they appoint a capitalist named Ngo, Ngo, Dinh, D-I-N-H, Diem, D-I-E-M. Ngo Dinh Diem, to be the leader of South Vietnam. A election is to happen in about 2 years, reunifying Vietnam back into one whole as it always had been. The West, we don't want that election to be held. We know, everybody knows, Ho Chi Minh is going to win that election easily. Ho Chi Minh is the George Washington of his country. He drove out the foreign colonial oppressor. As such, he is known by everyone and loved by everyone in both the North and the South. He is a national figure. Diem is known mostly only in the South, and when the French leave, they appoint a Christian, I believe a Catholic Diem, to be the leader of South Vietnam. But Vietnam is mostly a Buddhist country, so Diem is seen as abandoning the religion of his people, Buddhism, taking on the religion of the foreign colonial oppressor. If you want to see how this plays, go tell your family, oh, I'm converting to another religion. How will they respond? Oh, really? Why are you converting? What do you like better about the new religion? Maybe we'll want to convert also. Obviously not. They will be very angry at you, and try telling them especially you're converting to the religion of the enemy. See how that plays. And so we know Ho Chi Minh is going to win this election. We can't have that. We don't want a communist to be democratically elected as the leader of a major Asian country. How can we complain that they're dictators if they're democratically elected? Might inspire the rest of Asia to also want to elect communist leaders. Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, India, onto the oil fields of the Middle East. We do not allow the election to be held. We know Ho Chi Minh will win. And one of my former students, Vietnamese woman, heard me say that the French are responsible for the mess that is Vietnam. She was a little puzzled, and she took another class, did some research. This was what she wrote. Ho Chi Minh was an educated man. He traveled to the United States, Russia, Moscow to become educated in socialist and communist ideals. Now she quotes directly from Halberstam. Ho Chi Minh was one of the extraordinary figures of this era. Part Gandhi, part Lenin, all Vietnamese. He was an old Marxist and a founding member of the French Communist Party, Yet to most Vietnamese peasants, he was the symbol to their existence, their hopes, their struggles, their sacrifices, and their victories. To the population of Vietnam, he was the symbol they needed. The gentle Vietnamese, humble, soft-spoken, mocking his own position, always seen in the simplest clothing, his dress making him barely distinguishable from the poorest peasant, a style that many Westerners for many years mocked, laughing at his lack of the trappings of power, of uniform, of style, until one day we woke up and realized this very simplicity among his people was the basis of his success. Halberstam, page 12 to 13. The student continues, this was Ho's greatest strength in being successful. He earned the trust from his people and was loved. He did not force their affection and confidence upon them. Instead, he merely showed how he was like them. The Vietnamese saw him as one of them, pursuing the interests of the Vietnamese, not the French. Ho Chi Minh didn't need any material possessions to symbolize his influence among his people. Diem, the American-sponsored leader of the South, on the other hand, had police cars with wailing sirens separating him from the people. Diem was flashy, just like how the Americans were. And so we don't want this election to be held. Vietnam can be divided in half forever. Ho Chi Minh won't go for that. Of course, we wouldn't like it if some foreign power came in and divided us in half and said, now you're going to be separated forever. Ho Chi Minh, deprived of his legitimate victory at the ballot box, tries for a military victory, begins the invasion of South Vietnam, begins the Vietnam War. We throw everything we have at them. One of my students did some research for me. The Rolling Thunder Air Campaign after 1963. The two Vietnams, in 5 years, the two Vietnams received the equivalent of 22 tons of explosives for every square mile of territory. That works out to 300 pounds of bombs for every man, woman, and child in the country. 7 million tons of bombs and defoliants were dropped in total, and 2.6 million Vietnamese were killed. Agent Orange, napalm, we throw everything we've got at them. Somehow they manage to win anyway. The country, of course, completely destroyed by our bombing. Why they have been so poor. War communism in Vietnam. One person in control, Ho Chi Minh, until he dies at a very old age. Still the Communist Party. all resources to the military. The people have been poor, and no freedom of speech for the Vietnamese people. Next revolution to cover would be Cuba, 90 miles from the American coastline, and a Castro is still in control when I am giving this lecture. Fidel was the name of the Castro, 1959, kicks out the US-installed dictator named Fulgencio Batista. Under Batista, Cuba was known not just for what it's known for today, sugar and tobacco, finest cigars are supposed to come from Cuba, but back when Batista was in control, Cuba was known for gambling and prostitution run by the mafia. This is the subject, the theme of the great movie Godfather 2. Castro rises up, is kicking Batista out of power. Batista goes, the mafia has to go also. Early in the movie, one of the mafia chieftains is laughing with the others, how happy they are to have Batista, the leader of a whole country who lets the mafia in to exploit Cuba. Castro kicks out Batista, kicks out the mafia. Now the mafia has to figure out, where are we gonna go? They find that lightly populated state out in the American West, Nevada, very ugly place, mostly a very ugly place. Nobody lived there, especially back then. They used their big-time mafia money and muscle to take over Nevada. Castro then kicks out Batista, kicks out the mafia, thinking that Cuba's men should do something better than deal cards to rich American gamblers, and that Cuba's women should do something better than sell their bodies in prostitution to satisfy the sexual desires of the rich drunken American gamblers, rises up, kicks out Batista. Once the United States realizes Castro is not just against gambling and against prostitution, we couldn't complain much about that publicly after all. He is also a socialist, like Mossadegh in Iran, thinks the profits generated by the products of Cuba's economy should go to the Cuban people, not to the United Fruit Company, big American corporation, controlled Cuba's agriculture. United Fruit became, I believe, Chiquita Banana, among others. Their lawyers were the Dulleses, with Sullivan and Cromwell, John Foster Dulles, Allen Dulles, same people who kicked out Mossadegh. The profits should go not to United Fruit, but to the Cuban people. The profits from Cuba's mining, controlled by Alcoa, the aluminum company of America, back then I believe was controlled by the Mellon family, the Mellon Bank. The profits should go not to big American corporations, but to the Cuban people. The big American corporations don't like that, of course. They want the profits for themselves, like it had always been when Batista was in control. So the first thing the United States does to try to get rid of Castro, trade embargo. Get everyone to refuse to trade with Cuba. Anyone who says, oh no, we want to trade with Cuba, what do we say to them? You trade with Cuba, you will not trade with the United States. Who do you want to trade with? Some small little country in the Caribbean, or the world's most powerful economy? We hope thereby to starve the Cuban people, ruin their economy. Hope they'll blame Fidel Castro. Many of them do blame Fidel Castro for their country's economic troubles. What does your average Cuban know about trade embargoes? All they'll see is Batista's gone, Castro's over, economy collapses. Looks like cause and effect. As soon as he takes over, the economy collapses. Looks like socialists don't know how to run an economy. Then maybe the Cuban people will want to change, get themselves a leader who does know how to run a modern economy. Then the United States can step in when they're looking to change, use our money and muscle, get a capitalist reinstalled as the leader of Cuba, let Alcoa back in, let United Fruit back in, make the money. Any Cuban leader who allows the capitalists back in to make the money, of course, that Cuban leader, that capitalist Cuban leader, will be well compensated, made wealthy, same as we did for the Shah of Iran. Unfortunately for our strategy here, there is one country in the world wants to trade with Castro's Cuba, help his socialist revolution. That country, of course, is the Soviet Union. Russia, Cuba's communist big brother and sugar daddy, takes Cuban sugar in trade for Soviet oil. Russia has a lot of oil. Castro now can get oil, basic requirement for any kind of modern economy, run the combines, run the tractors. Cuba's economy does not collapse. Now Castro terrifies the United States, tries to stir up revolution. In Africa, in South America, the famous Cuban leader named Che Guevara goes to South America, lead the South American people in revolution. That's his famous book and movie called The Motorcycle Diaries. Initially, Che Guevara was from Argentina. He becomes a doctor, gets his MD. As a graduation present to himself, he buys himself a motorcycle, takes a motorcycle trip around South America, the Motorcycle Diaries. While he's riding around South America, he sees with his own eyes the terrible suffering of the people of South America, children dying of starvation, rich people have plenty of extra food, rich people don't share the extra food with the poor, with the children of the poor. Let the children of the poor starve. Children of the poor dying of disease. Rich people have lots of extra medicine in their medicine cabinets. Don't share the medicine with the children of the poor. Let them die of disease. It's one thing to hear me talk about this for a few minutes, but when you have to see it with your own eyes every minute of every day, children starving, dying of disease, rich people could help, rich people don't help. Che Guevara then realizes it's not enough to be a doctor. He's treating only the symptoms of the disease. As long as there's such great inequality of wealth and such great inequality of power, there will always be children dying of starvation. There will always be children dying of disease. To really cure a disease, you have to get to the cause of the disease. You have to redistribute the wealth and redistribute the power. You have to become a revolutionary. Not enough to be a doctor. They just treat the symptoms. You have to be a revolutionary. Redistribute the wealth, redistribute the power. Che Guevara goes back to South America, try to lead these poor, desperate South American people in revolution. One of his famous quotations, the true revolutionary is motivated by great feelings of love. Love for the poor people, the impoverished children of South America. Che Guevara, going back to South America, lead them in revolution, ultimately does not work out well at all. Very badly planned. Unfortunately, Che Guevara is killed. See the two-part movie called Che. The first part is 3 hours, that deals with his activities in Cuba. The second part, 3 hours, also deals with his activities in South America. But the United States can see now Castro is not just a threat to the interests of the American corporations in Cuba. Potentially he's a threat to the interests of American corporations all over South America, so we can't wait for any trade embargo to work. That's too slow. The situation is getting desperate. Step 2, invasion of the capitalist Cubans. Cubans who had made their money with Batista, so when he's kicked out, they have to leave also. They're seen as traitors. They go principally to Miami, where they are joined by Cubans who blame Fidel Castro for Cuba's bad economy. They don't blame the United States embargo, they blame Castro. The CIA moves into the capitalist Cuban community in Miami, organizes them into a military force, gives them weapons and training, goes back to try to overthrow Castro, the invasion at the Bay of Pigs. Also very badly planned, the invasion is a disaster. Castro then wants nuclear weapons from Russia, so he doesn't have to worry about being invaded again, the nuclear missile crisis, and then we try to assassinate Fidel Castro, even known to be using the mafia to employ their legendary talent, put the hit on Fidel. This article, an obituary from the San Diego Union Tribune, always amuses me, where in the capitalist press I have to go to find the truth. Judith Campbell Exner, paramour of John F. Kennedy and Sam Giancana. Let me read just one paragraph from the obituary. She claimed that during Kennedy's presidency, she was also Giancana's lover and carried messages between the president and the Chicago mob boss, including details of a plot to assassinate Cuban leader Fidel Castro. And I like this one even better. This is a book by Robert Mayhew, is his name, Robert Mayhew, an aide to the very famous billionaire Howard Hughes. Robert Mayhew, M-A-H-E-U, Robert Mayhew, who worked for the Central Intelligence Agency and the mysterious Howard Hughes, reveals how he served as a matchmaker between the CIA and the Mafia in his new book, Next to Hughes, published by HarperCollins. Mayhew says he recruited mobsters Sam Giancana and Johnny Rosselli in 1960 to help with a secret CIA plot to shoot Fidel Castro, his brother Raul Castro, and the Cuban revolutionary leader Che Guevara. Why is the Mafia so ready and willing to use their talent to put the hit on Fidel? What did Fidel do to the Mafia going back to the beginning? He kicked the Mafia out of the beautiful tropical paradise that is Havana, Cuba, made the Mafia take up residence in the desert hellhole that is Las Vegas. If somebody did something like that to me, made me leave the semi-tropical paradise that I live in here on the beach, in Ocean Beach in San Diego, move to Las Vegas, Steve, you're going to have to give up your job at San Diego State and the beautiful University of San Diego. Steve, you're going to have to spend the rest of your life teaching at UNLV. If somebody did something like that to me, I would be very annoyed also. For communism in Cuba, one person in control for the entirety of my life. The last name has been Castro. All resources to the military, they're afraid we might try to invade them again, and little freedom, of course, for the Cuban people. Now on to Central America, 1979, Daniel Ortega and his group called the Sandinistas. I'll leave it to you to research Augusto Sandino, S-A-N-D-I-N-O, Augusto like August. Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas rise up, kick out the hated U.S.-installed dictator Anastasio Somoza. See the movie Under Fire starring Nick Nolte. Be careful, there's more than one movie titled Under Fire. This, the one starring Nick Nolte, deals with the very popular nature of the uprising by the well-loved Sandinistas against the hated U.S.-installed dictator Anastasio Somoza. This all begins back in the 20s and 30s, the United States, the 1920s, the 1930s. The United States invades Nicaragua, installs Somoza Sr. to be the leader of Nicaragua. The Marine General who leads the United States Marines into Nicaragua, the very great general named Smedley Butler. Smedley Butler, one of the all-time great Marines. When he died, he was the most decorated Marine in all of Marine history. I believe it said he won 19 medals, 5 medals for heroism. The United States Marine who taught me about him said when she was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, the name of the Marine base there was Camp Smedley Butler. And when the Marines here at MCRD, the Marine Corps Recruit Depot here in San Diego, just got themselves a new English Bulldog mascot. It was Smedley Butler who selected the English Bulldog to be the mascot of the Marines. They named their new English Bulldog mascot, would you like to guess? Smedley Butler. And this is from his famous retirement speech. Look up Smedley Butler's retirement speech from his great book, War is a Racket. a racket, an inside job. Only a few people on the inside know what's really going on. Everybody else doesn't have a clue. This again from his retirement speech, looking back on his career, obviously with deep regret. And he was the main general that led the Marine invasions of all of the countries I'm about to name. It wasn't like today where maybe we send one general to Afghanistan and another general to Iraq. He was our main general, led the U.S. Marines into all of the following countries. Looking back on his career, he says, "I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism." Now he starts to mention all of the different countries he led the Marine invasions and exactly what we were stealing from each individual country. "I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped to make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank to collect revenues. I helped in the raping of a half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street." I really like that one. "I helped in the raping of a half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for an international banking house. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for American sugar interests in 1916. I helped to make Honduras right for American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, when Mao rises up against Chiang Kai-shek in 1927, see the China lecture just before this one. In China in 1927, I helped see to it that Standard Oil, now Exxon, Chevron, Texaco, etc., went on its way unmolested." Looking back on his career, obviously with deep regret, realizes he has not been doing what every Marine is pledged to do from the Marine fight song. "From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea, just to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine." Smedley Butler, realizing he has not been fighting for right and freedom, he has been raping Central American countries for the benefit of Wall Street. His honor has not been kept clean. I had a student put up their hand and say, why was his honor not kept clean? Because rape is not an honorable act. His honor had not been kept clean, and so when a United States Marine finds out they have accidentally been involved in something immoral, the only way to make it right, make what they call a full disclosure, lay it all out, don't hold anything back. This is what I did, this is what I thought I was doing, now I realize this is what I was really doing. That's what Smedley Butler is doing here in his retirement speech. And so finally, 1979, Daniel Ortega, the Sandinistas rise up and kick out the horrible dictators, the Somoza family. Once the United States realizes Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas are not just reformers committed to addressing the worst abuses of the Somoza dictatorship, they are socialists like Castro, like Mossadegh, want to use the profits generated by Nicaragua's economy, bananas, coffee, for the Nicaraguan people, not for the United Fruit Company. Nicaragua, just another one of the banana republics run by the United Fruit Company. United Fruit, American capitalism, the American government, not very happy with Daniel Ortega. First thing we do to try to get rid of Daniel Ortega, trade embargo, try to ruin their economy, starve the people, hope they'll blame Daniel Ortega. Many of them do. What do they know about international trade embargoes? Then the Nicaraguan people can seek to change their government, get somebody in power who knows how to run a modern economy. We can step in at that time, use our influence and muscle, get a capitalist reinstalled as the leader of Nicaragua, let United Fruit back in to make the money. Unfortunately for our strategy here, one country in the world is ready to help Nicaragua. Soviet Union, Big Brother and Banana Daddy, takes Nicaraguan fruit for Russian oil. Daniel Ortega The Sandinistas now start to stir up revolution in neighboring El Salvador. El Salvador ruled, according to legend, by only 13 families. Everybody else in the country works for them. Everybody else desperately poor. The Nicaraguan, the Sandinista strategy, get weapons into the hands of the Salvadoran peasants. Then, like the Second Amendment, they will rise up, majority rule. They'll kick out the 13 families who own and control everything. Our strategy, the United States strategy, prevent the modern weapons from getting into the hands of the peasants, make the peasants fight with sticks and stones, knives, single-shot rifles, pistols, arm the army of the 13 families with helicopter gunships, tanks, machine guns, jet planes. Then the few can dominate the many. In the middle of all of this fighting in El Salvador, the Catholic Archbishop of El Salvador, Oscar Romero, now being sped on his way to sainthood by the Vatican, he is murdered by the capitalists. See the movie Romero, starring Raul Julia. Makes it plain, initially, Romero was selected to be the Archbishop of El Salvador to calm the violence down, to teach the peasants of El Salvador Jesus does not like violence. Jesus was not a violent guy. So if you use any violence to attain your freedom, Jesus is going to be mad at you and you're going to burn in hell. So you're going to get screwed now, you're going to be poor now, you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity. The only way for you to make out here is turn the other cheek and turn the other cheek and turn the other cheek and let them slap you around as much as they want. Have faith in God. God will make things right. Remember the mission of the Catholic Church. Prepare your soul for eternity. What's one life compared to eternal life? Make sure you prepare your soul for eternity. Go to church, do the sacraments, get the last rites. Then Romero becomes the Archbishop of El Salvador, sees with his own eyes, just like Che Guevara, he sees with his own eyes the terrible suffering of the Salvadoran peasants. Children dying of starvation, rich people have plenty of extra food, don't share it, let the children starve. Children dying of disease, rich have medicine, don't share it, let the children starve. Let the children die of disease. At that point, Romero starts to move more towards what's called liberation theology, which holds if you see your neighbor being beaten, mugged, raped, and killed, it's more than your Christian duty than to buy them some Band-Aids and say some prayers over their dying carcass. Sorry you're being murdered. Hope God shows you a good time in heaven. It's your duty, so far as it's in your power, to try to stop the beating, stop the mugging, stop the raping, stop the killing. This is the theme of the final episode of the ancient comedy show Seinfeld. One of my students gave me the book Seinfeld and Philosophy. The final article is entitled, Is Doing Nothing Something? You're familiar with the episode. The Seinfeld crew is watching this guy get beaten and mugged. They're laughing at him. They're taking pictures of him. They get arrested also because they didn't help him. Good Samaritan laws, they're called. To whatever extent it's in your power to help, and you don't, to that extent, you are an accomplice to the crime. You are responsible also. And so now the rich people in El Salvador that control everything can see that Romero is going over to the side of the peasants. He is gunned down, murdered by the capitalists. In any case, now the United States can see the Sandinistas, Daniel Ortega, a threat not just to the interests of big American corporations in Nicaragua, a threat to the interests of big American corporations in the rest of Central America, so we can't wait for any trade embargo to work. That's too slow. Step 2, invasion of the capitalist Nicaraguans. Nicaraguans who had made their money with Somoza, so when he's kicked out, they're seen as traitors. They have to flee. They go to Honduras. It's too far for them to go to Miami. They go across the border to Honduras, where they are joined by Nicaraguans who are upset at the decline in Nicaragua's economy caused by the U.S. trade embargo. They blame Daniel Ortega instead. The CIA moves in, organizes the capitalist Nicaraguans in Honduras into a military force, gives them weapons and training, sends them back to invade Nicaragua, try to overthrow Daniel Ortega, get a capitalist reinstalled as the leader of Nicaragua. And the CIA was known to be supporting the sale of cocaine in Los Angeles to help the capitalist Contras, as they were called, in Nicaragua, trying to overthrow Daniel Ortega. See the movie Kill the Messenger? See the movie Kill the Messenger. It was about this story on the front page of the San Jose Mercury News. Silicon Valley, not exactly a hotbed of communist thought. The author, again, the movie is called Kill the Messenger. The author did some research. I would like to read you just the first passages from this article. The San Jose Mercury News broke the story. For the better part of a decade, a Bay Area drug ring sold tons of cocaine to the Crips and Blood street gangs of Los Angeles and funneled millions in drug profits to a Latin American army run by the Central Intelligence Agency, a Mercury News investigation has found. This drug network opened up the first pipeline between Colombia's cocaine dealers and the cocaine cartels in the black neighborhoods of Los Angeles, a city now known as the crack capital of the world. The cocaine that flooded in helped spark a crack explosion in urban America and provided the cash and connections needed for LA's gangs to buy automatic weapons. It's one of the most bizarre alliances in modern history. The union of a U.S.-backed army attempting to overthrow a revolutionary socialist government and the Uzi-toting gangsters of Compton in South Central LA. The army's financiers, who met with CIA agents both before and during the time they were selling the drugs in Los Angeles, delivered cut-rate cocaine to the gangs through a young South Central crack dealer named Ricky Ross. Unaware of his supplier's military and political connections, Freeway Rick, a dope dealer of mythic proportions in the LA drug world, turned the cocaine powder into crack and wholesaled it on the streets of Los Angeles. And so the CIA, willing to sell crack cocaine to our own people, fund this army trying to overthrow the socialists who want to use the profits generated by the products of Nicaragua's economy for the Nicaraguan people, get a capitalist reinstalled. Nicaragua, of course, has been a terrible mess ever since, although Daniel Ortega is still in control. On to the next country that we raped for the benefit of Wall Street. Of course, our president says that they are sending us rapists. As far as General Smedley Butler was concerned, we raped Central American countries for the benefit of Wall Street. Guatemala, 1954, the people of Guatemala democratically elect a fellow named Jacobo, that's Jacob with an O, Jacobo Arbenz, A-R-B-E-N-Z, Guzman, G-U-Z-M-A-N, his slogan, the spirit of his campaign, Guatemalan fruit for the Guatemalan people, not again for the United Fruit Company. United Fruit Company not very happy, so they get the American government that they control to skip the trade embargo, and here we go right to step 2, invasion of the capitalist Guatemalans, went across the border to Honduras, again Honduras the staging area, come back and violently overthrow the democratically elected government of Jacobo Arbenz Guzman. Both Fidel Castro and Che Guevara were in Guatemala City and watched the overthrow, saw how violent and brutal the American American-backed forces were, and any Guatemalan who disagrees is going to be murdered, same as we did in Iran with the Shah. Anyone who doesn't like the fact that we overthrew the democratically elected government who wanted to use their resources for the people and replace them with a traitor who's on the side of American corporations, anybody who complains, they will be killed. And according to Amnesty International, I'd like to read a little of this. It's from the Daily Aztec, the San Diego State newspaper. Guatemalan abuses remembered in talk. You can see this is from 1987. William Castaneda sat in his classroom at the university in Guatemala, stared out from a window. Outside, his countrymen marched in protest of low wages and poor social status. The people were tired of being tortured mentally and physically at the hands of U.S.-supported Guatemalan troops. They were tired of living in dirt-floored shacks, while politicians, industrial leaders, and military officers lived in grand mansions. The Guatemalan army has killed more than 140,000 Guatemalan citizens. Think what a small country Guatemala is. They have killed more than 140,000 Guatemalan citizens since 1954. According to Amnesty International, that was the figure traditionally accepted. The government that we installed murdered 140,000 Guatemalans who complained that we overthrew their democratically elected government and replaced them with a traitor. Then in April 24th of 1998, I found this little article in the Union Tribune. Guatemalan war toll put at 200,000. This is according to a report by the Catholic Church, in Guatemala. An extensive investigation has found that 200,000 people died or disappeared in Guatemala's war, Catholic Church officials said. So it wasn't 140,000, it was 200,000. Then 4 days later, April 28th, I find this article, much bigger in the Union Tribune. Bishop's activism may have cost his life. The bishop who made the report embarrassed the capitalist government. Oh, they were so brutal, they didn't just kill 140,000, they killed 200,000. The bishop who made the report was murdered 4 days after the report came out. Can you figure out who killed him? And last, I want to talk about the Philippines, since we have so many people from the Philippines in the United States and we have such a special relationship with them. We initially get the Philippines as a colony at the end of the Spanish-American War. Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, and I learned what I am about to teach you when I saw this article on the front page of the Union Tribune, one of the back sections, 100 years of Philippine history. So this came out in 1998. We got the Philippines in 1898. 1898, after more than 300 years of being a colony of Spain, the Philippines was acquired by the United States for $20 million. We paid that to Spain, by the way, not to the people of the Philippines, after we won the Spanish-American War. All right, that I knew. This next part I had never heard of, although I have done some research, and it certainly is spot on. 1899 to 1902, actually my research indicates right up until the beginning of World War I. The Philippine-American War. I never heard of this. At least 1 million Filipinos and 4,000 American soldiers were killed in armed resistance against American rule. It says at least 1 million Filipinos and 4,000 Americans, not exactly a very close contest, were killed in armed resistance against American rule. A lot of the people in the Philippines were very upset that they were going to be a colony of the United States. They went from being a colony of Spain to a colony of the United States. A lot of them didn't want to be a colony of anybody. They wanted independence. Isn't that what all people want? They rose up in revolution against the United States, and we murdered anybody who complained. And sometimes I've wondered why the people of the Philippines love the United States so much. Any of them who didn't love the United States, what did we do to them? We killed them. And as I was teaching, I started to notice that really all the students I had from the Philippines were Catholic. That wasn't true of the other nearby Asian countries, Vietnam, although there were some who converted to the Western religions. Many of them, most of them, retained the native religion, Buddhism. In the Philippines, they all converted to Catholicism. What must the Spanish have done to any Filipino who would not convert, abandon their religion, convert to the religion of the oppressor? Anybody who wouldn't convert, what did the Spanish do to them? Murdered them, obviously. Very Christian behavior. My strategy now, round out your view of the world, what's going on everywhere, what's going on over there, what's going on over here, over there in the former colonies, Asia, Africa, South America. As I have been indicating, people struggling with the most serious things in life, unemployment, poverty, homelessness, starvation. Over here, what are people concerned with? The answer I like to give to that, the shape of their behinds. Of critical importance in the life of the American people, as every lady especially knows, to be socially and sexually successful, it is of critical importance to have a nicely shaped behind, put it in a tight pair of pants to show it off to maximum effectiveness. Many men have been scared away by a woman with a well-developed mind. Tell them you got an A in philosophy, see how far that gets you. No man has ever been scared away by a woman with a well-developed behind, and pretty much the first thing anybody does when they put on a new pair of pants, turn around, see how it makes your butt look in the mirror. And some genius capitalist marketer came up with this, a butt cam, a camera so you can see how your butt looks on a screen in front of you without having to turn around. After all, when you turn around, that might change the shape of your butt. And not just with women on this side of the Pacific Ocean. That former Marine, female Marine, who told me she was stationed at Camp Smedley Butler in Okinawa, got me this aimed at Japanese women. This is padding Japanese women buy to put under their panties. They admire the fuller Western figure and want to imitate it without the pain of plastic surgery. They admire your fuller behinds, although generally you don't think of your behinds as fuller, you think of your behinds as fatter. They envy you your fat butts, you envy them their skinny butts. The butts are always more beautiful on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. And I remember I had a student once come up to me, a middle-aged woman, told me she worked in the lingerie department at one of the department stores in Fashion Valley, and she said to me, "Steve, you're right, women are very concerned with the shape of their behinds, but Steve, I think you're really underestimating how concerned women also are with their breasts." And boy, did I feel stupid. I thought never in my life would I ever be accused of underestimating the importance of a woman's breasts, and there it was. I'd done it. Not really, by the way. I'm not interested in such things, of course, but not only for women, nowadays for men also. I like to title this little segment, The Moronization of the American Man, the root word there, moron. Just as it used to be acceptable for a woman to be a moron, who cares if she's intelligent or even particularly nice, as long as she has a nice body, shows it off, the guys are happy. So today it is equally acceptable for a man to be a moron, who cares if he's intelligent or even particularly nice, as long as he has a nice body, muscles, and so forth. This quotation that I got from the newspaper from a martial artist and actor named Jean-Claude Van Damme. He says, "I'm very proud of my butt. What you can do is contract your butt hard for 15 seconds, then release, and I mean hard. Do this 20 times a day, and you won't be able to walk, but you'll look like Van Damme." And the same guy says pretty much the same thing a year later. I found this in the newspaper. Must be a very big deal with him. Jean-Claude Van Damme. "I admit, I do have a very nice butt. Every single reporter asks me about my butt. Some would say my career was built on my butt. Some would say his life was built on his butt. Some would say he is a butt." I'm not sure if that follows. But also this calendar aimed at the female population of San Diego State, a muscle calendar. Okay, for a man to be a moron, not even particularly nice. As long as he's well muscles, nobody cares about too much anybody else, especially also if he has a lot of money. This will lead me into the next lecture on civilization and its discontents by the famous social philosopher here, Sigmund Freud, followed by especially the one focusing on how advertising creates all of this body image concern, the next lecture that I call Marcuse.